What do you think that Kubrick saw in you, to ask you to play the part in The Killing?
To tell you the truth, I don't really know. I do know that when Kubrick came to town, my agent, Bill Schifrin, called me and he said, there's some weirdo out here from New York who's supposed to be a bloody genius, and he's got a script that people think is great. He said, but some of us know better. He said, and the trouble with this script is that he tells everything 5 times from 5 different points of view, and he mentioned the film Rashomon, remember? And I liked very much watching, I liked Kubrick. He was sort of cold then, but something told me, because I'm not entirely as stupid as I make out, maybe, I respected him, and I liked the way he shot, and I loved the way the camera was always moving, and we were moving, everything was moving, and I had a pretty good time on that picture. Had a great time with Elisha Cook, had a great time with everybody, as I remember it.
Did you share your agent's opinion of the script when you read it?
Well, at that point, I half the time I would work and not even know what the script was. I'd read the part and figure if I could perhaps get away with doing it. But in terms of somebody said to me, hey, Hayden, here's $1 million tax-free to tell us what happened, I couldn't tell you.
Three Films and a Podcast has no claim of ownership on any film footage used in this episode. All film footage is owned in its entirety by the copyright holders and is used solely with the intent of film criticism, commentary, and education under fair use law. And just like every car in Too Fast, Too Furious, this podcast contains spoilers. Enjoy. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Three Films and a Podcast, the podcast where normally 3 friends watch movies that they haven't seen before, but today we're doing something a little bit different. We are in the round of Unsung Gems, and what that means is that we are each picking a movie that we personally love or thought that we loved, in the case of Rules of Attraction, but that we don't end up hearing too much about or talking too much about. So today we're going to be going over my pick, which is Stanley Kubrick's The Killing from 1956. Matt, do you want to tell us a little bit about the movie?
Yeah, so The Killing is Stanley Kubrick's directorial debut. He wrote and directed it. It stars Sterling Hayden, Colleen Gray, Vince Edwards. Yes, Edwards. And Sterling Hayden, man, he was in just a ton of movies during this era. A lot of noir, and a lot of people who are, I guess, can't put a face to a name. He's in The Godfather. He's the one, I believe it's Al Pacino. Mm-hmm. It's when Al Pacino kills at the diner.
Spoiler
in The
alert.
Godfather.
What? Honey! Wow! Are you kidding me? You just ruined it!
Yeah, spoilers if you haven't seen this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, that's honestly the only thing I knew him from. I had a Godfather poster growing up, and I remember always seeing his name on the cast, like Sterling Hayden. So that might be literally the only other movie I've seen him in is that one scene. So seeing him in this was great to see him actually have a speaking part.
He's in some cool stuff.
Is he?
Yeah, he was a cool character.
Yeah, I didn't even look at his IMDb, to be completely honest. That's how prepared I am. I've now seen 2 movies with Sterling Hayden that I know of.
I'm sure there's other movies that other people would recognize. I mean, Dad, if you're listening, I'm disappointing you right now, but yeah, I mean, I talked to my dad about it, and he's on this big noir kick, and he's like, Sterling Hayden's in everything. I'm like, I've never seen this man in my life.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, he plays the lead in this. I mean, for the most part, the lead, and does awesome. I mean, I would like to see him in more things.
He was probably my favorite character in the movie. Mm-hmm. If I had to pick one.
Yeah, I guess if we were going to put it into modern times, he's kind of our Danny Ocean. He's our George Clooney of this movie, the brain behind the whole, the heist. I really enjoyed this movie. I'll go into my review real quick and kind of my history with the movie. You guys if you've been listening to the podcast, you kind of know how this started was from, Fuzz and I having a watch, a movie club together, which came from me doing a weird movie challenge on my own. And I had to watch a Stanley Kubrick movie that I'd never seen before. And on a whim, I think it was probably at the 50% off Barnes & Noble sale for all the Criterion movies. I saw this cool cover of this guy with a clown mask and a gun. I was like, I'm going to see what this is all about. And I turned on The Killing, and I honestly, the first time I saw this, I was just blown away. I was like, oh, this is amazing that these kind of movies were done back then, because I just had no exposure to them. I think Sterling Hayden was fantastic. I just love the idea of just putting all these pieces together. And one of the great things I think in the movie is that there's not necessarily a scene where everything gets explained how it's going to go. I feel like the individual members kind of find out what their roles are. There is a meeting where they're all together, but there's not the whole Ocean's 11 breakdown of like, this is exactly what's going to happen.
You mean there's going to be 2 other guys in on the deal, and we ain't going to know who they are?
That's right. You don't know who they are, and they don't know who you are. That makes sense to you, doesn't it?
Well, yes, I guess so, but
Makes sense to me, all right. How come we need them, though, Johnny? What are they going to do?
Oh, one of them's for the job with a rifle. None of you boys can handle that, even if you were willing to. And the other one starts the fight in the bar.
These other fellas, how much are they cutting in for? Not that I mind. Anything you do is okay, but...
These men are not going to be in on the basic scheme. They're getting paid to perform certain definite duties at a certain definite time. And they're not cutting in on the take. They'll be paid a flat price to do a straight job.
So I kind of like that, because almost like some of the individual members were kind of left in the dark about it, which I think was a different twist, I guess, on the normal heist movie where we just have the montage of here's exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to just dip into my review a little bit. I started out by talking about the 500 movies in 1 year challenge when I discovered this. And then I went on to say, like, I recently nominated it for the 3 films on a podcast Unsung Gems round and can finally rest easy about my choice. This is like Reservoir Dogs meets Ocean's 11, but in a black and white debut film from Kubrick. This turns out was actually like his 3rd feature film, but the first 2 were a little over an hour long, and even he considers this like his first real feature. And I just for a debut, this was just amazing. I wrote in there that some of the acting is still in the old style of acting, which I don't know if it's just like a sign of the times or also just kind of being a noir movie where there is just that kind of like very over dramatic, like emphatic acting, it's like, okay, I'm very passionate about this. I'm like, all right. So that's definitely something that sticks out, but I also think it goes with it. It doesn't necessarily seem out of place in my mind.
Yeah, I feel just because it is black and white, it is like a cool noir film, like it does get a pass because like even in modern noir, like there's a little bit of over dramatization or a little bit of melodrama in the acting. So I felt like it worked for me. It didn't even bother me at all.
That's good. Yeah. And that really is like what I took away from is that this was appropriate for the movie.
For sure.
You watch some of these old black and whites and just like the really like strong embrace and hug and that kind of a thing. And there's plenty of that in here with this kind of acting, but I think it works really well. To kind of wrap up my review, I just talked about the fact that, this was his debut, but I wouldn't necessarily have pinned this as a Kubrick movie if I didn't know that. But I think there's one thing that he shows in this movie that goes on to like everything else that he's ever done is like the control that he has over the film. Like with the narration, the cinematography, the acting, all of that. Like you can see and hear Kubrick's like ability to control a scene, control a movie, control a narrative, which we see in all kinds of different forms, whether it's The Shining or 2001. I just think that's one thing that he's great at. Like when it's a Kubrick, like you really see his like fingerprint on it in the best way.
For sure.
And yeah, at the very end, I just wrote, and that ending, chef's kiss. Because like I'm sure we'll get into it later. I'm not going to spoil it in the first like 10 minutes, but it's one of the endings from a movie that just like plays in my head over and over. I'm like, oh, it's so good. Like just the visual of it. I love it so much. So Fuzz, do you want to kind of go into your review?
Yeah, I gotta find it here real quick. Sometimes I forget how to navigate Letterboxd, but It's okay. I got there. We're good. Speaking of things told out of order, I'm gonna jump to somewhere in the middle of my review here, because at first I agreed with you when you said you wouldn't have known it was a Kubrick film, and like in all honesty, I'm not enough of a cinephile to be able to watch a movie and be like, no, this is definitely a Kubrick, or this is but one of the things that really jumped out to me from the movie was how authentic it felt and how lived in and how real it felt. And for as limited as it was, I mean, we only see like 4 or 5 physical locations in the film, but all of them felt fully realized and very real and very lived in. And so like, you know, the set design and the costume design, granted, the costume design was just, you know, the design of the time or the style of the time, but it all felt very real and authentic. It felt like these were all real people. They all had, you know, they had some like weird quirks and imperfections to them. They didn't feel, even though, you know, Sterling Hayden was obviously a movie star, but he didn't feel like a movie star, you know, just kind of like an odd cast of just like, you know, everyday people. And I think that's, and that's true to what I know for Stanley Kubrick. You know, like when you think of like 2001, that feels like a very real place, you know, like the world he creates there is very lived in and authentic and real. And so for me, if I think about it that way, this definitely does stand out as a Kubrick film because I fully bought in, even though I could tell just by virtue of the way the film is made and the limitations of the technology at the time, like it didn't really feel like a movie. You know what I mean? It felt authentic. So I thought that was really cool. But I wrote in my review that it was a weird movie to try and rate because I felt like in order to properly rate it, you'd have to put yourself into the shoes of someone viewing it in the time that it came out.
Oh,
right?
Yeah,
like,
good point.
Just because you compared it to Ocean's 11 and Reservoir Dogs, which I agree with, but at the same time, like this, it's just by virtue of the limitations, like I talked about earlier, it can't be as engaging as those because it can't move as fast and the camera can't move in the same way. And it can't have a lot of the same dynamism. What's that?
Dynamism?
Word? Is that a word?
I don't know.
It's not as dynamic. You know what I mean? I don't know. You can choose to leave that in the pod if you'd like. I don't really care. But
invented word, dynamism.
I feel like that's a word, but I don't know. I haven't read as many books as I'd like to. Maybe we should do a book podcast so I can read more.
Hey, you know the rules of movie club. Come on.
That's true. So in all honesty, like my initial reaction was sort of meh. Like I liked it, but I was just like, okay, great. Like whatever. But then the more I thought about it, in fact, I just wrote this review right before we recorded because I was still thinking about it. Once I kind of thought about like what it must have been like to see a movie like this in that time, then it really sort of jumped up to me. And I really thought about how difficult it would have been to have created these sets and to capture a lot of the shots that he got and create the world he created, given what he was working with, you know what I mean? And I just read that the budget was below $500,000, which I don't know how that translates, you know, from now to the 50s, but that seems like a very small amount of money. So
I think it still would be like an indie budget because I think it was like $230,000 or something. But I mean, even if it's 4 times as much, still $1 million. That's definitely indie. You know, a very low indie now.
So like, given all of that, I mean, once I really thought about it, I was like, it was really impressive, and I loved the fact that we get straight into the story. There's no lollygagging. It's an hour and a half. You jump right in and you're playing catch up the whole time. And then you kind of see what happens and then the movie's over. And when I first saw it, I was like, okay, great. I don't know. It didn't have like, it wasn't as much of a payoff as something like Reservoir Dogs where you're like on the edge of your seat or completely blown away by it. It's like, you can kind of see where things are going, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, especially through the lens of someone in 1956. Like I don't know if viewers had seen anything quite like this at the time. So once I thought of it that way, it really kind of, you know, I wrote that it jumped up a star for me. It went from 3 to 4. And I don't want to give the impression I didn't like it. I really did. In fact, like a lot of the camera work I thought was really cool. I don't know if you remember, if you guys remember, there was a shot. I can't remember who it is, but a character enters a door. And you see them open the door and then the camera backs up and you're actually seeing it through the reflection of a mirror. And then the character comes around a corner. Like, there was a lot of really cool stuff like that where I was like, I don't know, like, I just don't have enough knowledge to know if people were doing stuff like that at the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like there was a lot of really cool little movements and some cinematography that I really liked. And, you know, the world felt very real to me, and I liked all the set design. And I really, like I said, I felt like they were really real people in real places. That's, I think, what I appreciated the most. And it was pretty cool to see Kubrick start to establish himself in that style and kind of establish that flair in an early film. But I really did not like George or Sherry.
Yeah, Sherry is just the worst.
Those guys are such a bummer. Like, George is such a whiner, and Sherry's like such a conniver. Yeah. And I mean, obviously those were by design, but even like we talked a little bit about like the melodrama of it. Like, George was a little too much for me. Mm-hmm. Like his little puppy dog eyes, and I was just like, all right, dude, I get it. Like,
don't you love me, Sherry?
don't you love me?
Tell me something, would you, Sherry? Just tell me one thing. Why did you ever marry me anyway?
Oh, George, when a man has to ask his wife that, well, he just hadn't met her, that's all.
It's like, no, George, she probably doesn't.
Oh, take a hint, man. Like, no, she's not onto it. But.
I feel like you have to have that guy in these old movies, though. There's always that guy.
For sure. I was like, you're just too much for me. I don't know. And I'm not like a macho guy. Like, I'm a pretty soft guy myself. And even I was come on, George. Like,
George, get it together.
I've probably cried in like a third of the movies that we've watched in this movie club. So I'm no like super tough guy, but yeah, he's just like, George, get a little bit of a backbone, buddy. But you're right. I think they all like come across as very authentic, but I think they're also kind of like clear characters. Like, you kind of know who they are when you see them, which is kind of cool, but it's not necessarily George and Sherry aside. It's not like a caricature or anything like that. It's just like, this is who this person is. This is who this person is. Like, okay, got it. I know what I'm dealing with now. This is great. And I think you're, talking about when it came out versus now. I think, that's one thing that we have to deal with and that people have to deal with. That I know for me growing up, like, if there was a black and white movie, I was not interested. I'm like, why? We have color now. Like, there's nothing. If they didn't have color, it couldn't have been good. But now, like, my favorite movie of all time is Casablanca. It's like you make great films with what you have. And I think this is one of those films. I think if you look at it in the context of what they were watching back then, I'm sure there were other heist films, but it's like thinking of heist films now. If you showed people from the 1950s, the modern day, like, Mission Impossible, like jumping out of the plane and like skydiving down to like Paris. It's like, okay, this is a little bit different than just like, okay, you throw the bag out the window. It's like, there's different rules now, like different roles, that kind of go into this. But I think if you're able to kind of think about the context at the time and when it came out, it really just kind of helps elevate, I think, just how powerful the film is. Matt, I'd love to hear what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I mean, my review doesn't have the same dynamism that Fuzz's has.
I swear that's a word.
I confirmed it was. It is a word, and you used it correctly.
Nice.
Goddamn right.
Vindication.
Fuzz does read.
You have been vindicated.
Ben and I don't.
He used to read. He used to read quite a bit. It's been a while.
Movies.
Anyway, I mean, I guess initially, this is actually a really short review, shorter than I usually do, but to echo some of the things that Fuzz said, 1956 was the year that both my wife's parents were born. And so it was kind of fun to just try to imagine them viewing the movie for the first time. And so I was kind of did the exercise of trying to put myself back there as well. And it's true, like, if you think about the heist movies that we've had the privilege to see that have totally piggybacked off of heist movies like these, then all of a sudden it does feel more fresh and like feels more awesome. Just to think that like they couldn't see Ocean's 11, they couldn't see The Italian Job.
Yeah.
They didn't get to enjoy Logan Lucky.
I am incarcerated.
So it was fun to look at it from that lens and just like see a new heist movie. And I mean, I haven't seen a ton from that era. And along with sort of what Fuzz was saying about Kubrick, I'm not studied enough in that arena to say what had been done and what hadn't been done.
Mm-hmm.
And so while I like to believe that Kubrick was innovating and introducing unique things in this movie, all I can say is that if he wasn't doing that, he at least was, it was very evident that he was a student to film with all the techniques that he was using. Like it immediately, like, I mean, I've seen a decent amount of like older movies, and just watching that initial scene where, or one of the earlier scenes where, I'm trying to think of what character it was. The guy who's writing down the address to the barkeep and the ticket booth guy.
Yeah, that was pretty
when
early.
he's walking through I guess by the box office, and the camera's panning along with him as he's walking through the crowd. And it's like, man, that's got to be an early technique. Like, people weren't really doing that, you know?
Well, imagine how, like, the limited budget he had, like, if someone messes up, like, that's like a tenth of his budget just on one blown shot. You know, it's pretty brave to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, and he's maintaining the rule of thirds. Like, he is very aware of his frame. Like, he knows his composition, and he's just, like, executing. And that was another thing that I think you pointed out, with like the entrances and exits and like some of these things that he's doing, the way he's like transitioning people from like one scene to the next, or even from one point A and point B in the scene. Like, it's crazy how like they'll start in 1/3 and then as they're like talking, like make their way to the second third. Like, I don't know. It's just like, I think the reason why this movie holds up is because those are techniques that are still being used today. And so they're timeless, and he executed them very well. And so we're not getting a one shot where people are composed in a room for 30 minutes and you're just watching that scene and all it is dialogue. Like, he's really made he's made the scene dynamic. So, I mean, those are just my comments pre-review. My review says, this is on my list of movies where a pooch dramatically alters the trajectory of the story.
I want to know what the rest of that list is, to be honest.
I need to make that list first, I guess. But this would be on the top of it right now.
Just this and all the Air Bud movies.
I mean, John Wick.
Oh, yeah. That's a good,
Yeah, John Wick would be a good one.
A really good one.
Yeah, I mean, I do need to make that list now. Now that I put it down on paper.
We got it.
I need to...
Rushmore Mountain.
Yeah. Pooch movies. Johnny was tough. George was haunted and then haunting. The score was uneasy. It was a nicely pieced together heist movie. Really cool to see Kubrick's work in this phase of his career. I was trying to figure out what exactly to say because I didn't. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And there is something, and I talked about this in another movie in Movie Club, and I referenced it with comedy, and you'll hear me say this a few other times when we cover comedies, is that like the reason why people say comedy doesn't age well is because it's been, it builds off of itself. So a movie that was funny 70 years ago, with like those early comedians aren't as funny now. And that's because every comedian from that point on has built on what they did then. And so to us, it's old and it's aged and it's like not as great. And while I feel like this movie was still like a super awesome and fun, like heist movie, there was still like I tried not to compare it to like the heist movies that I've seen now.
Yeah.
And I recognize that like those wouldn't be those movies without this movie. And so I guess I was just struggling to find where to write at length about this heist versus, I guess, more complex and more planned out heists. But I think, I don't know if it was you, Ben, or Fuzz. It was Ben who made the point that like it was fun to like have pieces of the heist not know what the plan was.
Yeah.
And just be paid. And so we get to discover that as they're discovering it, really. And that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think that was one of my favorite parts about it. Like I said, you just jump right into the story and you're playing catch up as you go along. And it was a simple enough plan that it was easy to catch on. But the fact that you're in the dark most of the time, like you kind of, it's despite it being such a simple plan, it's hard to figure out what's going on just because you're in the dark, and it's a cool device for sure.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. You know, when he shows up at the chess club, which we can get into some trivia later, but you know, apparently it's based off of somewhere that Kubrick used to go all the time. He's a big chess fan. And I loved the comparison that you can make between like a game of chess versus like planning a heist. You know, you've got to be thinking steps ahead. And I think that was no coincidence that that's, you know, kind of one of the main points, I guess, of the film. You know, it's where we get, I forget his name, but the big like pro wrestler dude.
Maurice, my favorite in the whole movie.
Maurice, yes. But he's one of those like two people where they're not told at all what the big picture is. It's just like, I need you to come here and start a fight in this bar. Like, what's it about? It's like, I just need you to do that. Like, I'm paying you this much money because I just need you to do that. I'm not telling you anything else. And then the other dude, like, I need you to go snipe down this horse, which is like a little bit more dramatic, but
yeah,
you know,
like,
I need you to go like shoot this horse for me. It's like, oh, okay, cool.
Sure. I'll just park in this parking lot with my rifle next to the grandstand and blow away the leader of the pack.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that because I was like, first of all, I don't know why, but I just love that the windshield just like folds forward. I was like, what kind of car is this? We're just like, I'm done with this windshield. I'm going to fold it forward now. Like I thought that was great. But part of that scene too, that kind of reflects the whole movie, is just how, I guess, I don't know how to phrase it, but basically like you can't get away with what you don't earn, so to speak, you know, essentially karma. Because, you know, he lies to this dude. He's like, oh, my legs, like I have a war injury. He's like, oh, I do too. Come on in.
Look, Mac, I'm a paraplegic. And I want to get in this lot to watch the races from my car.
That ain't my problem, mister. My leg's bummed too, but nobody's feeling sorry for me.
I know what you mean, buddy.
Get that in the war?
Battle of the Bulge. Say, look, I know there's a lot of extra trouble for you. I want you to...
No. Skip it.
I want you to take it. Now go on. Keep it. It's all right.
Thanks a lot, mister. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Forget it. So you take down that fence. I'd like to get settled down before the first race starts. Okay?
Sure, mister.
And then, you know, he's trying to make small talk and just kind of chat with him. He's like, hey, dude, I brought you this lucky horseshoe. And then we get the worst part of the movie, you know, it's like trying to get him out of there because he's got a horse to shoot. So he drops the N-bomb on this guy. But we get the karma later on with that horseshoe, just like laying behind his tire and keeping him from getting away. And I just like, I don't know. I kind of wanted to get your guys' thoughts on the actual plan itself, because one thing I noticed that feels different to like the modern day heist movie is we don't have, if I remember correctly, we don't have a lot of instances where the person's role, like something happens. Like if I remember correctly, like almost everyone's able to do exactly what they're supposed to do. The conflict and the chaos comes after it's done. You know, it's like the heist goes off pretty well. Like they're all waiting at the back of the apartment. Like there's not that kind of thing where it's like, oh, now he's here. We gotta like plan B. I'm sure I might be forgetting something, but for the most part, that doesn't happen. It's just like everything comes afterwards. And I think that was kind of a unique aspect of this kind of heist movie. And I was just like, you know, if you guys have anything to add about the actual heist or the plan, anything like that, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say.
Yeah, the only thing that really goes wrong per se is when George tells Sherry the plan and she tells her boyfriend. Yeah. And it's weird that they don't change course after that. Mm-hmm. They're just like, yeah, we'll just take you home. You know, like they don't even do anything after that. They're just like, you shouldn't have done that. Like,
yeah, I don't just like shake their fist at him. Oh, yeah,
I thought it was a little strange that they kept with the plan, because everything was so meticulously planned and they were so careful to not tell people parts of the plan and keep people in the dark by design. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was kind of strange. But also, I don't know. It didn't ruin it for me. But I was like, why wouldn't they change the plan at all? Like, and just let her go home? I guess maybe it's just straight sexism. I guess I don't know. Like,
yeah, or just overconfidence, or maybe it's too late. Because was it the next day that the plan was going off? I don't know. If like
it was pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then beyond that, like one thing that I kind of actually appreciated, but it did stick out to me, is like, despite the stakes at hand, there was no sense of urgency really from any of these guys. I didn't feel like when Johnny, you know, he goes to the locker and he's suiting up, Like he's putting his gloves on slow and he like fits the mask nice. And he's just like, he was going so slow. And in my mind, I'm like, dude, hurry this up.
Someone's going to walk in and see you.
You have very limited time. Like you have a guy starting a fight in the bar, but that can only like take this so much time. That distraction's only good for so long. And he just taking his time and just, I liked it because it built up some tension, but it personally, I was like, dude, you've got to hurry up. Like, what are you doing? And like, I just thought it was interesting that there wasn't really any urgency, even when their plan seemingly had been foiled by George spilling the beans. They're just like, we're fine. And I don't know if that's just a sign of like where, criminal like forensics was at the time, or like the level of like policing. They're just like, you could just get away with stuff like that. Maybe that's the case, but to me, it was just like, that's why it almost didn't really feel like too much of a heist film to me, because like no one seemed to be in any hurry. And in most heist films, there's like a pretty tense pace. Not that there wasn't any sense of like urgency, or there was no tense moments in the movie, but it just like, despite it, like, it's sort of contradictory because the movie didn't seem like it lagged at all, but it just was like the character's individual approach to what they were doing. There's like pretty chill, which I thought was both strange and cool.
Yeah. Especially given, the circumstances. That's a good point about Sherry. I feel like the sexism actually probably plays into it quite a bit. It's like, hey, who's this broad going to tell? It's okay. Like, we don't have to do anything about this. Like,
don't believe her.
Yeah, she's just a woman.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sure that kind of played into the reasoning behind not like hunting and doing something else. But
and for people in that time, that was probably perfectly logical. It's like, yeah, they wouldn't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Her.
And I wonder too if some of the overconfidence comes from the Sterling Hayden character, Johnny Clay, I believe. Because when he talks to her one-on-one, I think you can see that she's used to being able to like manipulate George and get what she wants. Like she got the details of the heist out of him because he's, eager to please her. But like Clay wasn't playing into it at all. And I think that kind of like threw her off a little bit, which may in turn have just like made it worse, because then she was like more determined to get this money. But I don't know. Matt, what are your thoughts on the heist itself?
I thought it was awesome. I thought it was, my interest was immediately piqued by seeing the address, passed around at the beginning, seeing who's going to meet up. Everyone sort of lying to their spouses about where they're going to go. And it was also interesting. Like, we don't get a huge sense of like any backstory other than like Johnny's been in prison. Sounds like George has been like down on his luck, not really been able to live up to his own expectations. The barkeep has, a sick wife. We're given enough to give a little bit of reason for why they might be doing this heist. And it's funny that like Johnny's like the one running the thing because he's probably the one who has like the least amount of reason to be doing it. Like just out of prison, wants to immediately do a big job. And so, but the heist itself, I thought it was cool. And like we talked about, like looking at it from the perspective of someone in 1956 seeing it, and not really, I mean, I'm ignorant to what heist movies were around at that time, but like seeing that plan unravel, seeing the guy like start the fight and being like, this is his part of the plan. And just like you're connecting the dots as you're watching it. Like Johnny's standing by the door, George is like watching, and George, like, kudos to that actor, even though he overacted like most of the movie, at least he looked like he was going to blow it at any point.
For sure.
Oh, yeah.
It's like anyone just looking at him could have just like arrested him and found out what was going on.
He was, loose lips for sure.
But no, I thought it was cool. I really liked the scene where the bartender brings the gun in the box to the locker room, and those guys are like, hey, what's in the box? He's like, oh, it's just flowers. Like, can we see? It's like,
yeah.
And then like,
let me put some water for you. No, leave my flowers alone.
And then they just leave. Like
I had the same thought that he had like put the gun in the guitar case. The sniper did. I'm like, what if someone asked him to play a song? Like, what do you do?
Here's $1. Play me a song. No.
I mean, like, it could have happened when he's in the parking lot. The guy comes over, he's like, "Hey, you got a guitar? Like, play me a song." Like,
yeah,
you know,
exactly. It's funny you mentioned that with George though, because for one of the other like pieces that sticks out to me of this movie is the ending of George, so to speak. But you know, when all those people in the apartment waiting for Johnny to show up, and then the boyfriend shows up with the other dude, and one of the great things about, I think, that the ending scene is that we are watching these people get picked off like one by one. Like the sniper's done, like all these people. And in my mind, at least, I'm like, oh, Johnny's share is just going up and up and up. You know, like he has less people he has to pay out now. This is kind of nuts. But I did love at the apartment, though, when the boyfriend's like, where's that jerk? And he just comes around. He's like, the jerk's right here.
Can't believe you were tipped, huh? What if I had a certain little lady here? Hey, where's the jerk? Where's George?
The jerk's right.
It's just like shoots him, and then he just like, I'm gonna go kill Sherry now, and then probably die. Like it was just, man, he really was ready to pop off, and he did. He went kind of nuts, but I mentioned it towards the beginning of the pod that like one of the scenes that has always stuck with me is that ending scene at the airport. And I would just love to hear from you guys how that ending played out for you. Like, I know for me, I didn't see it coming. Like, you knew something bad was going to happen, you know, like when you can't like check in the suitcase and, you know, there's things that are arising, but like what actually happens, I personally, the first time didn't see it coming, and it just kind of like floored me. Matt, I mean, what was your response? You know, what did you feel when you saw that?
Yeah, well, I mean, so leading up to it, it's kind of funny because like before he heads to the airport, he pulls behind a bush, like he pulls off the side of the road, pulls behind a bush, and dumps all this money and like leaving money, like he's just stuffing as much as he can into it.
It's like, bro, it's
like
your wallet, maybe like you want like a few $100
like, yeah. So he's already being like super sloppy about it. Closes his briefcase, does like the little lock thing, which kind of, I feel like that kind of like foreshadowed the issue with the lock. Just like that speaks to Stanley Kubrick's storytelling. Getting that like nice close up shot of him like locking that snap.
Yeah. And
they get to the airport. And what I love about the airport scene is like so much has not changed about the airport.
Right.
Like, that scene with the airport is exactly what you see today. And
they're way nicer in the movie than they are in real life these days.
That's it. Might be the same ones from the 50s that we were driving around on.
True.
So they they get it all figured out, and what's funny is, and we've talked about this before, it's like, why are we rooting for this guy to get away with this?
Yeah.
And you know something's going to happen, but you have no idea like how or what, but then you also don't know. It's like, is he just going to get away with it? And that's the end of the story. And then, I mean, the way it transpired, got to hand it to that pooch. Just absolutely destroys the plan.
Yeah.
And I mean,
really screwed the pooch.
It's really, the pooch really screwed the pooch. And such a memorable ending, just seeing everything just literally blown up.
Yeah. As someone that spent time at the airport, I think when that was all happening, I was like, oh, this either isn't going on the plane or it's getting loaded onto the wrong plane. Like something is happening with this luggage. Fuzz, like what were your thoughts of the ending?
I definitely didn't see the whole, the screw the pooch thing. I didn't see that coming, even though like for someone as meticulous as Kubrick, like why would he put just this all of a sudden this random lady with an annoying dog in the movie. Like, I should have probably seen it coming to some degree. I for sure knew he wasn't keeping that money. Like, there was too many things happening just with the plan itself falling apart. Even before the plan fell apart, like, maybe even just by virtue of knowing how these sorts of stories are told and what happens in these sorts of things. And these are the bad guys, and why should they get away with it? I knew he wasn't going to end up with that money for whatever reason. I didn't see it happening the way that it did. I liked the ending, but it wasn't a shock to me at all. I was like, oh, he loses it because of that dog. I should have seen that coming. But other than that, I was like, there's just no way this works out for anyone. You know, like, there's like, it just can't. It just, for as well planned as it was, I don't know. It just too many loose ends, and I don't know. It just, to me, it felt like it was a doomed endeavor from the start. So when it turned out to be true, it was like, okay, great. And then it's because of that stupid dog. I don't know. So it didn't have the same impact on me that it did to you. But I mean, I definitely liked it. It was cinematic. Like, watching all that money blow away in the wind was cool and
so awesome.
And it wasn't a bad. I didn't dislike the ending, but it was just sort of like, it felt natural to me. It felt like the right ending. You know what I mean? There's no way those guys just get on the plane and they're scot-free. Like, they had to get caught, and I liked the way that it happened.
Yeah, this isn't a happy ending movie by any means, and rewatching it this time, I agree with you. It definitely felt like, okay, yes, this is appropriate. This is the solid ending that it's supposed to be. I don't know. I can't really speak to what it was. It just kind of shocked me the first time. Yeah, it just really kind of took me by surprise, and I think maybe it was just the visual of the money just like circulating in the crosswinds of the planes and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. One of the other,
and like, what, like, I just like, I know that these guys we're nitpicking here, but it's like you bought the cheapest, you went to a thrift store.
I know, right?
like, you have a sack full of cash. Like, you could have gotten any number of different types of luggage. You could have just checked that stupid duffel bag. Like, what? Like, why? Like, why this shitty trunk? And then, like, you went through all this trouble to get the money, and like Matt said, you're just gonna let it blow away in the desert behind this bush. You're not gonna pocket a few $1,000s, or like, I don't know, man. It just was like he deserved to lose that money. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't disagree. And honestly, this is the first time I'd even like considered like, he could have just checked that bag. Like, I don't think they were doing the TSA like X-rays back then. It's like, he could have just done that. But also said he like,
what's in this bag?
Yeah,
wool.
I want the largest, most poorly constructed piece of luggage you have, please. Like, dude, like, get 2 carry-ons. There's 2 of you going. Like, at least like split it up. Do something.
You're paying all this money pre-heist for like Maurice to go start a fight and all this. Buy the trunk beforehand. Like, all the things you had to plan, and you didn't go and spend $100 on a nice piece of like solid luggage. Like, he deserved to lose it.
I think it's what makes it like a fitting ending. One of the things though that I really enjoyed about this, and I'd be curious again, like, I'm not super knowledgeable on all the films back then, but a movie told in a non-linear way. I think this was the earliest I think that I can recall of a movie doing that. Just kind of like breaking up the story in different ways. I'm sure there's different, I hope Steve gets in the comments and tells me like the top 10 movies that I'm forgetting about that have done this before The Killing. But for my limited experience, like, this was the first time I've seen like a non-linear story, which was interesting because like it didn't work initially for the studio. So that's why we have the narrator on there to kind of explain all of it. But
which I did want to mention, like, this is a sort of rare instance where like that's like from what I know from the film classes I've taken and from what I've learned working with you, Ben, is like, that's filmmaking 101. Like, your narrator, like, you can't just have a narrator. Like, it has to like tie in somehow, right? Like, usually there's a reveal that the narrator is the detective of the case, or whatever. And it very well be the case that that's true. But it was just like, we just have a narrator, and for whatever reason in this movie it's fine. And I thought that was really interesting. And I think it's just a testament to how well crafted the rest of the movie is, where you're like, all right, I'll give that a pass. You know what I mean? Like, doesn't matter who the narrator is.
It should have ended where a hand grabs a dollar bill from the air and then it goes to the guy's face and he's narrating.
and it's Sam Elliott at the bar. Like, dude, you have to swear so much, you know?
I like your style, dude.
Oh, well, I dig your style too, man. Got a whole cowboy thing going.
Thank you. There's just one thing, dude.
What's that?
You have to use so many cuss words.
What the fuck are you talking about?
But seriously, I think that is I say it jokingly, but I think it's a great example of a narrator. Like when Sam Elliott takes us through The Big Lebowski, like we even see him a couple times. Like it's perfect. I think, in researching this movie, and I wonder if this is why they did what they did, but apparently the guy's name is Art something, I don't remember, but apparently he was like a very big radio personality back then. So I wonder if maybe that's why they felt like they could get away with like not introducing him as a character, because people may have just been used to hearing his voice.
Okay.
I don't know what the equivalent of that is today, especially now that, radio is somewhat of a dying medium, but it's like, I don't know, do I get like Howard Stern to come narrate my movie?
I think the only one who could do it is because of Arrested Development. I think Ron Howard's voice popping in.
Yeah, that's a really good example where we don't need to see him, but we know what the role is. So it's a perfect example. It's Ron Howard. I think it's a great example. But I just thought it was kind of and this was based off a book. I think it's called The Clean Break. So I'm sure the nonlinear story came from that, but I don't know. I really enjoyed seeing it in this film, and then I'm sure all of us have looked this up and know this, but Tarantino talks about it really kind of helped inspire Reservoir Dogs, it influenced it a lot, which totally makes sense if you've seen Reservoir Dogs.
Speaking of influence, I didn't really look into it, but it had to have influenced the intro of The Dark Knight to some degree. I mean,
yes.
It's like
clown face.
It's pretty much, it's like the clown faced, like it's like it had to.
Yeah, those masks that they use, masks that they use were like almost. I mean, I don't know if they're exact, but they're similar.
They're pretty close, and the idea itself is like pretty much, and maybe it could have been just a well crafted homage. Like, there's no way that he wasn't influenced by this movie to some degree, setting that whole thing up.
I agree with you. I think, I looked it up because that clown mask was one thing that stuck out to me. I looked at some of the side-by-sides, and they are very, very close, because Sterling Hayden's, obviously it's in black and white, so we don't know the colors or anything, but his clown mask has like the beard. The main difference between the two of theirs that I could see is that Sterling Hayden's has like a slight smile, while the Joker's is just like, it's a frown. But, the Joker's has like the goatee looking thing. It has the facial hair paint, whatever you want to call it. But the nose, like, it's all very, very similar. And it'd be too much of a coincidence for it not to have like some inspiration for that. And even if we go back to Memento, like, we know Nolan likes nonlinear storytelling, like we know that with Inception and everything. So yeah, I thought it was great to learn that kind of inspired Reservoir Dogs, and I think it couldn't help but like also rub off on Pulp Fiction, and in my mind, Jackie Brown too, because that's another great heist movie where we got like all these individual people doing something. So I don't know. I had a great time with this film. Sounds like you guys enjoyed it at least a little bit.
Oh, I thought that was awesome.
I did wonder if I'd had the same experience as you with like no expectation, and I'm not going to blame you or whatever for you didn't ruin the movie for me by any means, but I do wonder if I had gone into it not knowing anything, because after you talked about it, setting up this round of Unsung Gems, I looked at like at the very least the IMDb rating, and it got like an 8 out of 10, and it's got a good score on Rotten Tomatoes, and I saw that it was on all sorts of lists of best of all time. And so I think that may have raised my expectation level to a place where it sort of was fighting an uphill battle, but I did like it. I did really like it. I did the heart like thing on Letterboxd. So, but I don't know if I'd ever watch it again, but I enjoyed it for sure.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's kind of where my thoughts on The Round came from, because I don't know that I've watched The Killing since that time, but I knew that if I ever was talking to anyone about Kubrick, I'd bring it up because it did really hit me. And I think it was maybe just because I went into it blind, you know, and it's like I had no expectations. Like I didn't read the back or anything. I just saw like there's a guy with a gun and a clown mask. Let's see what this is all about, you know. And I had a great time with it. I know I did that with you guys for Parasite, and I was like, because I don't want to ruin people's expectations by telling them how much I like something, but it's like there's just sometimes like in that Parasite example, like I need you guys to see this before the Oscars. Like you guys please watch this, you know, like we need to all commiserate how this is going to lose. But yeah, no, I'm glad you guys still enjoyed it. Do you guys have any particular favorite parts that you guys want to mention, even if we like already talked about it, something like to hit on?
Oh man. So like the one thing that was like that I kept thinking about as I was watching it, and like I enjoyed it through and through. I gave it 3.5 stars, but it probably should have been more of a 4 as I've thought about it, just because like I enjoyed it as much as I would enjoy any movie. And like the clown mask is iconic, like immediately. I guess iconic as unsung as this movie is. I feel like film people would know that the mask is iconic. Even though like most people maybe wouldn't know what movie it's from.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, what I was going to say is when I watched the roles of, I think, what was the name of the Sherry's
Val, her boyfriend?
Val.
I think it's Val.
I think it is Val. So Val was a very Mark Ruffalo character to me.
Oh yeah. And
not only was it a Mark Ruffalo character to me, like he felt like something that Mark Ruffalo would play today. Like it felt like a timeless performance of that role. Like Mark Ruffalo could do that in a movie today. And similarly, I felt like John Turturro could do the guy who sniped the horse.
100%. I'm glad you said that. I was like, is that a young John Turturro? It took me a minute to like figure out whether or not that was him or not.
Yeah.
I mean, he looks like him, but also the acting, I think, he could easily step into those shoes.
The way he could talk through his clenched teeth and everything.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm watching these roles. I'm like, man, like this doesn't feel that old, because I feel like I've seen this role recently done like in a similar way. So like, it was enjoyable to me that way. And as far as like favorite parts, I know that we've kind of given George a bad rap for his overacting, but like to me, this era of film, like I need that bug-eyed guy who's overacting.
Yeah.
And part of it's what makes it, because like in black and white with the values that you're able to get with lighting, you could get some really like brooding and haunting visuals. And man, when he comes in with that blood on his face to Sherry and confronts her, like that's like a scary scene.
It really is.
Like what, like how horrifying to like be faced with that. And like being in black and white is scarier than it would be in color.
Yeah,
for sure.
And so that part really stuck out to me. And like I already mentioned, the locker room scene where he comes in with this big box. There's a gun in the box.
Yeah.
And he's just like writing it off as flowers for his wife.
So good. Yeah. Just to quickly hit back on what you just said, when I read your review, like your line of like George was haunted and then haunting, I was like, oh, that was very, very well put. Like, because he does, like he has that transition, you know, it's like, oh, Sherry, don't you love me? Like, I'm going to strike it rich for us, you know, and then when they get confronted by the boyfriend, I think he finally comes to terms with like, oh, she doesn't love me. And he really just flips, like maybe goes too extreme. He's like, okay, this is how I'm going to deal with it. So yeah, I thought the way you put that was just perfect. I mean, it was great. What about you, Fuzz? Do you have any favorite parts that you've discussed or haven't?
It's a cop-out answer, but just sort of the whole thing, because to me, once the movie started, like a lot of times when I watch a movie, I pause for a minute or I go whatever, but I like this This one, just like, I watched it straight through, and by when it was over, I was like, oh, okay, great. It was like, it was succinct, it was to the point, it got in, it got out. So I just sort of really enjoyed the whole thing as a whole. But if I had to pick something, I would just say I liked the bar fight. I thought it was so silly.
Yeah.
Like, it was effective, like, but just like the choreography was just silly, and you know, like I don't know. I thought I just enjoyed it. I don't know if it was necessarily the best part of the movie, but it stuck out.
Gone are the days where you pick up a guy and then just spin around. In a circle.
Just like,
it was definitely the old school wrestling. Like, he just pulled those moves off.
Just like suplexing cops, and he rips his shirt off, and he's just like the prototypical beefcake 50s strong man.
Well,
just like
everybody just standing back.
Part where he was just like swinging his arms around.
Yeah, I just love, like, he'd be fighting one person, everyone else is standing back waiting for their turn. Like, all right, I'm gonna wait for him to throw him, and then I'll go in there. It's like, no, everyone go gang up on him. That's how you yeah. And in that scene, we can get a young Rodney Dangerfield is in that scene, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like one of his first, like, I don't know if he's even credited or not, but he's just part of the crowd that's watching the bar fight.
Oh, man.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Oh, I'm looking at it right here.
Yeah,
I want to see the Rodney Dangerfield cut where it cuts to his face and he gives like a small one-liner.
I mean, I don't get no respect from anyone. Well, last week my house was on fire. My wife told the kids, be quiet, you wake up daddy.
Or just like the alternate universe where, like, we follow his character while everyone else is doing all this stuff, you know? He's just like the guy that got left out. Yeah, I mean, for myself, like I said, the part that sticks with me always is that ending. Almost just more the visual than anything else. Just seeing all that money just like floating around. Yeah, I don't know. That's probably my favorite scene. I think I love it all, though. Just like
so good.
The noir style and look of it, of the black and white, like it worked perfectly for me. I really enjoyed this film.
For sure.
Do you guys have any trivia that you want to go over, or should we jump to Rushmore?
Yeah, I just found one, actually, and it ties into what we were talking about earlier. Apparently, the studio insisted he add that narration. He didn't want to do it. He hated the idea. And a lot of the information the narrator provides is false or mistaken by design by Kubrick, because he didn't want to do it. So it actually makes me like the narration now.
Yeah. It's almost like he's like giving the middle finger to the studio. He's like, all right, fine, we'll put stuff in. It's not going to be right, but we'll put stuff in if that'll help you. It's like the South Park guys like making the movie worse so that when they like sent it back in, they still got the R rating. It's like, okay, cool. Thanks. This is exactly what we wanted. So,
smart.
Yeah, very smart. I think, Matt, do you have one that you want to go over?
I didn't have any trivia.
No, it's all good.
They shot it in 24 days. That's pretty impressive.
That's crazy. Yeah, the two that I liked, we talked about The Dark Knight and like the Joker mask at the beginning. But another, kind of reference that we get in a modern movie is in Terminator 2, because they do hide a gun in a white flower box with a red bow on it.
Oh, no shit.
I mean, that can be considered like the traditional look of a flower box, but again, I feel like if anyone knows movies, it's James Cameron. I feel like he knew what he was doing, making that movie and having that in there. So I liked that. And the other, kind of the what if of like acting and things is apparently the original United Artists was going to buy the rights to the book, and they were going to use it as a platform for Frank Sinatra. So he would have been that Johnny Clay role. And I just like, I don't know. I mean, I guess we got Ocean's 11 instead, the original Ocean's 11. But for me, this has to be Sterling Hayden. This is his character. I can't picture Frank Sinatra coming out of 5 years in jail. He does not have that look to me at all.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I guess now that you mentioned it, this isn't trivia, but I did wonder when he stuffs the bag full of money and then puts it out the window. I couldn't help but think of Uncut Gems when Howard is stuffing the bag full of money, and doing that little thing through the window.
That's a very good point,
because you don't see money in a bag through a window very often anymore.
No.
So.
I like, and that was like just the one job the cop had, and I love it. He got like an equal cut as everyone else. Just like, I'm just gonna pull up here and get the money and leave. That's it.
I mean, shit, man. That's why you pay banks interest rates. They're keeping your money safe and sound. It's an important job.
He's got the clearance, so let's use it. Cool. Well, with that, I say let's jump into our Stanley Kubrick Rushmore Mountain.
Let's do it.
These are OR scrubs. Oh, are they?
Anyone want to volunteer to go first? Is anyone?
I'll go first because mine's the most embarrassing.
I love it. I'm so excited.
Reason being, I'm gonna, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, as much as I love watching movies, I'm not as much of a cinephile as a lot of people. And I have seen an embarrassingly few amount of Kubrick films. In fact, I've seen so few I can't even fill up a 4-spot.
If anyone's
Rushmore.
listening, this isn't true. This isn't true.
It's crazy. I thought I'd seen more. So, but when I looked, I was like, oh shit, I've seen I've studied a lot of stuff. So I've seen scenes of a lot of these movies, and I know like what happens in a lot of them, and I know, a lot about them. But the only movies I've seen in full are Eyes Wide Shut, Full Metal Jacket, Space Odyssey, and now The Killing. So that would have to be my Rushmore Mountain, just by virtue of default. I have a feeling if I had seen a few more, that list would change, because I didn't even really like Full Metal Jacket. The first half of the scene, the boot camp scene, the boot camp section, love that part, and that was probably just because I saw it when I was 15 and it was funny. But so I that probably would get bumped off, and maybe The Killing would get bumped off. But I love Eyes Wide Shut, and 2000 Space Odyssey is actually a movie we watched at the very beginning of this whole thing that you and I were doing, Ben.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was you and I, right? Like when we were just doing it. 'Cause I remember talking to you about that,
and it blew my mind. I couldn't believe what he was able to do in that movie. I still can't. That would for sure stay on there. But other than that, like it's open to I'm open to suggestions, and maybe throughout this podcast we'll find a way to get some more of those on my
I'm sure we'll throw
mountain.
some more in there.
For now, Eyes Wide Shut, Full Metal Jacket, 2001: Space Odyssey, and The Killing.
Cool.
That's great. Mine would be, and if it makes you feel any better, Fuzz, I fall into the exact same category of Kubrickdom as you do, where I had seen exactly 4.
Nice.
And so that makes up my Rushmore. The good thing is I really do like all 4 of them.
That's good.
So I would start off with 2001: A Space Odyssey. Man, that movie, I could just watch it, and I could just have it on in the background 100% of the time, just for how visually satisfying it is.
It's unbelievable.
It like watching it like as a movie was like, I could only do that every few years probably, just because of the pacing of it.
Yeah.
But as far as just like shot for shot, how good it looks, it's just like super awesome. And I'll never forget, what's it? Is Dave the main astronaut's name?
Yeah. I think that's who Hal talks to.
Yeah. They're just like, Dave, what are you doing?
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you doing,
Such
Dave?
a creepy voice. It's so
I know. I know, but I feel like so much comedy has come from that.
Yeah,
that seeing it in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it is scary. Like, it's a scary thing.
It's terrifying.
How did he do that?
I mean,
and computers are more sophisticated now, and yet that's more terrifying.
Well, I mean, just to cut in real quick. I mean, Tyler and I used to work somewhere, and the boss named the server Hal, and I was just like, "This seems like a horrible idea." Why would you do this? Like,
that was not
I
the
get
only
it.
horrible idea that
No,
company
that's
had.
that was pretty low on the totem pole of horrible ideas, but still, I'm just like, I get it, but this is just like a really bad idea to call it this. But yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Matt. Continue.
No, but I mean, Hal should be on the Rushmore Mountain of monsters in movies.
Yeah,
Hal is terrifying.
He really is.
Anyway, my second one for a similar reason would be The Shining. Like, The Shining, it's like a trippy movie, but man, like the colors and the shots that he captured in that movie are just insane. And like I watched it for the first time a couple years ago and was just like blown away that like no one has done what he did in The Shining better yet.
No.
Like Wes Anderson like does similar things in his movies, and he's kind of made some of those ideas like his own and gone his way, and like I love Wes Anderson, but like as far as like pushing that more mainstream and having a horror movie with that is like crazy.
Yeah.
Then I'd have to go with The Killing, and then to finish it off, Spartacus.
Oh,
interesting.
yeah.
That's
gotta
cool.
pull Spartacus into this.
You know, I think it's appropriate that neither of us have seen very much Kubrick, because that's the point of this whole movie club. That's the point of this podcast, right? Is for us to like experience new movies. So I like that we've got some work to do on our Kubrick Rushmore Mountain.
Yeah, I think it's been good. I mean, I know, like I said, we threw the round on its head this time where we picked something that we had seen, but the other two hadn't. But I think it's been interesting, you know, to kind of see and kind of like broaden horizons and stuff. So I think it's been great.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have guessed that Spartacus would have been the ones that you had seen. I thought for sure it was going to be, you know, Clockwork Orange or Doctor Strangelove or something.
Yeah.
And only just because those are probably the ones that I would have gravitated towards. But the fact that it was Spartacus, I think that's cool.
And that one's actually missing on my Kubrick list. I have not seen Spartacus.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
I know, right?
I mean, honestly, like a few years ago, Spartacus was the only one I had seen.
Really?
So.
That's amazing.
Yeah, for me, it would have been Eyes Wide Shut. Or I guess Full Metal Jacket. I saw that one first. But
I used to watch Full Metal Jacket because it was on HBO all the time. And I had like a TV down in my room, and I would watch I remember watching The Sopranos to see if they'd ever go to the strip club. And then Full Metal Jacket was on there a lot. And I was like, I understood the reference from Baby Got Back.
Well, baby, me so horny. Me so horny. You keep lying. Me love you long time.
Oh, that's from that movie. Okay, I know what that's from, so it's good. But yeah, speaking of Spartacus, my number one for my Rushmore Mountain, and this is like one of the other, you know, I was kind of going back and forth on these two Kubricks, but it's another Kirk Douglas, Stanley Kubrick mashup, and it is Paths of Glory, which he did after this movie. You know, Kirk Douglas saw this, even though it didn't make a lot of money, the box office or anything, but he knew he wanted Kubrick to work on Paths of Glory with him. I'd say that's my number one favorite Kubrick movie of all time. I've watched that more often though, so that's why, you know, I kind of overall went with The Killing on this round. But I'm not gonna lie, Fuzz, like when I gave you the thing of like a character with the last name, or an actor with the last name Douglas, you know, a movie from that, like I was hoping you were gonna either go with like The Game or Paths of Glory or just something. I mean, Michael and Kirk Douglas are fine, you know, like
I couldn't have gone with The Game because I'd already seen that by your recommendation.
That's true. Yeah,
I couldn't have chosen The Game. I would have loved to.
That's another great movie though.
Yeah.
That's one I think I'm looking back on it now. I'm gonna have to go back and change that Rushmore Mountain of San Francisco movies, because I completely forgot that takes place there.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
To me, that means it can't be on your mountain because you have to. It does. If the fact you didn't know is in San Francisco.
Yeah, that's a good point. Honorable mention.
It's your mountain. Don't let me shape your Rushmore.
Up there chiseling away on my Rushmore Mountain. So yeah, number one would be Paths of Glory. Number two would be Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, which, as I'm now looking at the IMDb, I'm realizing that I've seen 2 Sterling Hayden movies because he is also in this. Nice. So now I have 3 under my belt. This and The Godfather and The Killing. But Peter Sellers plays 3 characters in this film, and he is so good. It has one of what I think is like the funniest lines ever in film, when, you know, all the leaders are in what's called the war room, and they're literally like wrestling and fighting, and someone yells like,
"Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room."
It's such a good line. Like it's so precise and hilarious. It's so good.
And you just ruined it for us.
I ruined it for everyone. That's what you get for watching Spartacus.
Now I'm going to hear it and I'm going to roll my eyes.
Spoilers. So number 3, I'd go with The Shining. I mean, same reasons that Matt had mentioned. I think it's just like when I talked earlier about Stanley Kubrick having control over his movies, this to me is probably the most prime example of that, where just like everything is meticulous and perfect, and in order. Like it is just, it's so good. It is a great movie. And then I have, honestly, like I was kind of just going back and forth on my fourth. I didn't know what you guys would put up because I didn't want to like just have a bunch of duplicates. But I think I'll probably put Clockwork Orange on there. That's just something that I haven't rewatched it a ton, but I also haven't needed to because those scenes are like so vivid and just kind of stick with you that I know exactly what it is. And since I'm the only one that has options of honorable mentions, I'm just going to go ahead and rattle mine off. The Killing would obviously make it, which is just kind of weird to me that I didn't have it on my Rushmore because I gave it 4.5 stars in my Letterboxd, but I think I'd give these other movies 4.5 or 5 stars. Like he's just, a lot of what he does is just perfect. You know, he's a very timely, he's just a very like, I don't know, you know, it's a Kubrick movie, even though he's never really like crossing over on genres or anything like that. He's not just like in one area, but you know what it is. I think, I mean, I could be wrong. We can take this out if it's not right, but I think he was originally doing AI and then Spielberg took over because he passed away.
With Jurassic Park, Stanley Kubrick saw how technology had advanced and he said, well, I think I'm going to do AI instead.
Ultimately, Kubrick turned AI over to Steven Spielberg, focusing his own energies on Eyes Wide Shut. It was during the final stages of post-production on that film that Stanley Kubrick died on March the 7th, 1999.
And I think that just would have been a really interesting movie to see, like, Kubrick's AI. Like, it may not have been too different. You know, like, maybe Spielberg really just kind of kept very closely to what he wanted. Maybe this isn't, like, an Ant-Man situation where you don't have any Edgar Wright in it at all, but I still would have just loved to see his AI. So yeah, The Killing.
Kubrick would have pushed Jude Law's character a little further in AI.
Without a doubt.
There probably would have been some.
Yeah, The Killing, Full Metal Jacket, and honestly, like the hardest one for me to leave off was 2001. But I figured you guys would probably have it on your list. But I'm the same, Fuzz. When we watched this the first time, like even someone who had like taken classes and like made stuff and all that kind, you know, all that stuff, I still don't understand how he achieved some of the shots that he did. And just, it's amazing to me that he did it all the way back then and just how great it looks.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say that's my list. That's my Rushmore: Paths of Glory, awesome. Dr. Strangelove, Clockwork Orange, and The Shining. So
nice.
Yeah, I think this was a great chat. I'm glad that we got to watch The Killing. I hope any of you that are listening, you know, if you are interested in this, if this sounds like a good movie to you, I highly recommend it. Really, any Kubrick, I don't think you can go wrong necessarily. I'm sure we'll be hitting on some more as time goes on. But for now, thanks to everyone that has participated, everyone that's in the Patreon and just in the movie club, the 3 Films Movie Club. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we will talk to you next time.
Stanley Kubrick, if you're out there in the cosmos, subscribe to our podcast.
Like and subscribe, Stanley.
Yeah.